OK, so cutting-edge plans to use drones as first responders to police emergencies will be trialled next year.
If testing is successful, the devices would be stationed on buildings and operated remotely to be sent first to scenes to give police early information.
Initial trials under a scheme dubbed Project Eagle X will take place in Norfolk, which has limited access to the helicopters flown by the National Police Air Service. Further tests will also take place in Thames Valley Police and also in Hampshire.
Well, joining us now is former Met Police Chief Detective, Superintendent Kevin Hurley.
Okay.
Hi, Kevin. What do you think about this idea? I think there'll be people at home worrying that what could end up happening is that these drones are sent out instead of bobbies on the beat, and we'll just see even less robust policing in the UK. Is that a danger?
Kev?
Well, first off, there aren't bobbies on the beat. There aren't bobbies on the beat to send out in most instances. But I think this is about 15 years overdue, if not 20 years overdue. What this will enable, particularly in rural areas, is for police to get a situational picture on what's actually going on at road accidents, or perhaps a case of a rave that's gone out of control, or even if there are suspects running about in a local area, then they can use that drone to direct people to catch them. So it's long overdue. But it's just an example of how sedate and conservative police leaders are in making decisions to use modern technology.
But, Kev, a lot of people will be a bit disgruntled that with this focus on eyes in the sky is at the expense of boots on the ground. You know, we've seen recently, especially with the protests in London, the police seem to be standing off. They seem to be relying on surveillance and prosecuting people after the event if you're from a certain part of the protest movement, and that's a pro-Palestinian brigade. But if you're on the other side, then they're happy to wade in. Surely the answer is more robust on-the-ground policing rather than relying on more surveillance technology.
Well, I think it's probably a combination of both. Of course, we should use the latest technological means to make sure police are deployed to the right place, and that's what drones do. And as for noise, you know, people complain about a helicopter and they're much worse. So it's a start. But turning to your point about going into essentially what you're talking about is the pro-Palestinian demonstrations. Wading into a crowd is far more difficult than it sounds when you speak about it. And that's why the police are much more circumspect and are making lots of arrests, and I think they're up to several hundred after the event. So the message will get out there that you can't use hate crime and anti-Semitic language. But if you go wading into a crowd, which I've done many times in the past, you often end up with a much worse situation which develops into a riot. So I do understand why some of the police leaders are the way they are. And of course, you've got another problem, which is that police on the ground, the actual people who would have to do the wading in, are actually very, very concerned about being captured on camera these days, using force, and then 2 years later being judged in, if you like, the cold light of day, that something that happened in seconds was unacceptable and they lose their job. So I think the days of that are gone. If police were to bring one piece of modern technology in to deal with unpleasant demonstrators' behaviour, I'd urge them to bring in water cannon, because, of course, it sprays them, makes them wet, keeps them distant from the crowd and puts a stop to it.
I think there'll be plenty of people sitting at home who aren't planning on committing crimes anytime soon, who don't really like the idea of a sort of police state. It's a bit 1984-esque, isn't it? These drones circling around, filming innocent people going about their daily lives. Isn't that a bit of abuse of privacy and abuse of data as well?
Well, that's not the intention. The intention is they'll be stored on rooftops in strategic points, so that if an incident occurs, police can deploy the drone to start filming and downloading the control room what's happening, so they can then deploy police more sensibly to go into an incident. So let's say it's a burglar's been disturbed from a house. Rather than everyone goes to the house whilst the burglars run off in the bushes or woodlands beyond, the drone's up in the air watching where they are and then can deploy all the people. So I don't think it's anything at all like 1984. This is just a more sensible use of police resources to deploy them on where they're needed. And I wish they'd brought them in years earlier. And frankly, it just really annoys is the wrong word. It disappoints me that police leaders are so slow in embracing the latest forms of technology, because there aren't enough of them to keep us safe. My goodness me, the police have effectively lost control of the streets in most areas where we live. They don't turn up for most burglaries, and when they do, for all sorts of reasons, not the least of which is a lack of leadership and poor training, they're not robust, and they don't wade in when they should.
Yeah, and Kev, they're very useful, aren't they, in rural crime? For example, if they have heat-sensitive cameras, infrared cameras, they're very successful, for example, in tracking down illegal marijuana plantations in rural areas because they can see the heat, and they're also useful on manhunts, aren't they, because people can be seen.
Yeah, I mean, you've got big problems out in rural areas, which is where these essentially are being trialled, because, of course, you can't bring them into central London because you've got Heathrow and Gatwick flying over very close overhead, so that's strictly controlled. But where you've got lots of problems with people stealing farm machinery, stealing rustling cattle and so on, these are perfect to cover large areas of ground where you can then deploy police with appropriate trail bikes or 4x4 vehicles to try and catch the perpetrators before they get them in shipping containers and send them off to Africa or Russia or wherever they go, because once they're gone, they're gone. So, I mean, there are real advantages, and yes, I understand why some people might be concerned about what they think is Big Brother, but you're not going to see drones flying over you routinely patrolling, spying on people. They'll be used for specific incidents, if only because the batteries will run out. And things being what they are, they won't buy enough backup equipment to sustain them. So we're not going to see them everywhere, but, you know, good luck for the people of Norfolk and Suffolk who are going to profit from this.
All right, Kev, we're going to have to leave it there, my old son. Always a pleasure. Great stuff. Let's come back to studio. Suze and Steph are still with us. Suze, what do you reckon about eyes in the sky? Is that the right way to go? I mean, I think Kevin made a very compelling case for it.
I was sceptical, but I was won over.
I can see loads of benefits to it, and you should embrace kind of technology. I'm a bit worried about the batteries running out kind of point he made. At what point does it just fall from the sky and land on somebody's head? And I'm also concerned that if it does become, if there's a proliferation of them, he says there wouldn't be, but if it starts to become, I mean, wasn't there rumours that we were going to start having, like, you know, Amazon deliveries by drones, and there's amateur theatre? How do you know which is the police one? And how? You don't want the sky full of them, do you? But with one way or another. But I mean, the one thing I was just looking up the article while he was talking, and it actually said people who do the police forces who have embraced those sort of technologies, facial recognition is actually really, really useful, and that is identifying 200 suspects every month. Yeah, but something that would have taken 14 days to do.
We saw the Met Police on Twitter asking the public to help them identify Palestinian marchers who committed violent offences. Would be quite useful for that, wouldn't it?
And I think, Steph, that is where people start to get a bit edgy about this sort of stuff. It's like I'm going about my daily business. I'm not doing anything wrong. Yet you're still you still got your mince pies on me. Where's that data stored? Is that the right way to go?
I think this is why the public always feel a bit sceptical, and this is where we have to have a bit more trust in the police that they won't be abusing when they're using such technology, and that it doesn't go to the extreme end where we are being monitored unnecessarily. But we already live in that kind of generation where everyone's got cameras. People have got Ring doorbells and all the rest of them, so to be honest...
And we were talking earlier about those migrants. We were worried about them roaming around. Well, at least if we know that people have got eyes on them one way or another remotely, or they can do facial recognition, we can track people, those sort of things. Unfortunately, in the world we live in, it is necessary.
I think there is a competence issue a bit as well, though, isn't there? I mean, as he said there, you don't really like the idea of the batteries running out. Who are the people who are going to be running these drones? Are there enough police to actually staff them properly?
A great point he made, and when I was doing elections across West Midlands, rural areas there, North Shropshire, they get scant resource, and if they have the ability to have infrared technology, the cattle are getting nicked, or the tractors are getting nicked, these dope farms in rural areas, so it does have real merit.
And it would be a lot cheaper than sending up a helicopter.
And I think those are the
less polluting.
Yeah.
I think those are the best places to test it out, because central London is just too much of a beast. So I think to test it out rurally and just get it done properly before you bring it to London will be the best thing to do.